Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. And man, the news just keeps coming. Here at the Videntis, we're always sorting through it all, trying to find those stories that really matter. And today, we've got three big ones. They might seem kind of separate at first, but trust me, they're all connected. And they paint a pretty interesting picture of where U.S. politics is at right now. So we're going to dive into California Democrats making a pretty big move against the incoming Trump administration. We'll also look at the possible impact of S&P benefit cuts, which Republicans are considering. And we'll wrap things up by taking a deep dive into a special counsel report on election interference. That just dropped last week, actually. Let's kick things off in California. Governor Gavin Newsom and the state Democrats have agreed to use a lot of money. We're talking $50 million to fight the policies of the incoming Trump administration.
50 million, wow. It's definitely it's a big move. But we got to remember that California has a history of pushing back against Trump. Even in his first term, there were over 120 lawsuits filed by California, all against the Trump administration, of course. They covered all sorts of stuff, from immigration to healthcare to even environmental regulation.
120 lawsuits. That's a lot of lawyers. So where exactly is all this money going? Like, what are they actually going to do with it?
Okay, so $25 million of that is going straight to the California Department of Justice. It's basically giving them, a ton of resources to fight the federal government in court. The other $25 million, that's set aside to protect immigrants. Things like legal aid for anyone facing deportation and efforts to prevent wage theft, which, tends to hit immigrant communities harder.
So this isn't just about disagreeing on policy, then. It sounds like a pretty fundamental clash of values here.
Totally. California is often seen as a liberal stronghold, and they're basically positioning themselves as a shield against what they see as the extreme agenda coming from the Trump administration. It's a big signal to other states, to everyone really, that resistance is still out there.
Will it actually make a difference?
Yeah.
I mean, is this just a symbolic gesture, or can they actually stop the policies they don't like?
That's the big question. The legal battles are going to drag things out, for sure, could tie up these policies in court for years even. But it's also about the message. It's California's way of saying, we're not going to just stand by and let this happen.
Right. So let's switch gears for a second. Our second story today is about potential cuts to S&P benefits. We've been hearing that Republicans are, thinking about doing this as part of this big push to reduce the federal deficit.
Yeah, this story has huge EE implications. Over 40 million Americans use S&P to get food, and these cuts, they could be devastating, especially for vulnerable people. Think about it. Families struggling to, put food on the table. Seniors having to choose between medicine and groceries. It's, it could be really tough.
Hard to even imagine. And then there's the ripple effect. More people needing help from food banks. And there's research showing that when people can't afford healthy food, it leads to higher healthcare costs down the line.
Exactly. This story really gets to the heart of this debate about the role of government. What should the government be doing? What about these social safety net programs? Conservatives often push for smaller government, less spending, while liberals usually prioritize, they prioritize these social welfare programs. And these S&P benefit cuts are right in the middle of that whole debate.
So on one hand, we've got California actively pushing back against the federal government, and on the other, the federal government might be pulling back support for its own people. It's a pretty stark contrast, isn't it?
It really is. And it brings us to our third story today. This one's got a bit of a plot twist.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
So last week, Special Counsel Jack Smith released this report. It's 137 pages long, and it lays out federal charges against Trump for election interference in the 2020 election.
Okay, but why is everyone making such a big deal about this report?
Well, the Department of Justice actually dropped all the charges against Trump after he won the 2024 election.
Oh, right. You can't prosecute a sitting president.
Exactly. It's his long-standing policy. But Jack Smith, he clearly felt strongly about the evidence, because in the report, he outlines 4 felony charges, including conspiracy to defraud the United States and obstruction of justice.
So we get this detailed look at serious accusations, but no actual trial. This report's got to be causing some serious controversy.
Oh, absolutely. The report itself doesn't hold back at all. And in his letter to the Attorney General, Smith even says, To have done otherwise on the facts developed during our work would have been to shirk my duties as a prosecutor and a public servant.
Hmm.
But Trump, of course, he denies doing anything wrong, calling the whole thing a witch hunt.
Wow. A lot to unpack there. What do you think about the impact of this report? Could it set a precedent for holding presidents accountable even? Will it actually affect Trump's second term?
Those are really good questions, and those are exactly the kind of things we're going to be digging into as our deep dive continues.
All right, then. Stick with us for part 2, everyone. We're going to be diving even deeper into these stories and exploring what they might mean for all of us.
It's really something, isn't it, how these three stories, I mean, they seem so different at first glance, but they're all connected in a way.
Yeah, like pieces of a puzzle.
Exactly. You've got California, and they're putting up a real fight. That $50 million. It's a direct challenge to the Trump administration, basically saying, we're going to fight you every step of the way. And then, on the other side, there's this talk about cutting SNAP benefits, which would impact, millions of people. It's like two totally different visions for the country.
And then there's that election interference report.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hanging over everything.
Right. Even though those charges were dropped because, Trump won the election, that report still raises some big questions about the limits of presidential power, really.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? But, okay, let's try to connect the dots here. California is actively resisting the new administration. Republicans are talking about these policies that a lot of people see as harmful, especially to those who are already struggling. And then this whole election interference thing makes you wonder about the integrity of our democracy.
It does, doesn't it? It reflects how divided the country is right now. I mean, there are some fundamental disagreements out there about everything. The role of government, how to handle the economy, even just basic values.
So where do we go from here? How do these stories, these tensions play out?
Well, those lawsuits that California's funding, they're going to be long and complicated. We'll have to see how the courts rule, of course, especially if any of them make it all the way to the Supreme Court.
And what about the SNAP benefit cuts? Is there any way those could be stopped?
Hard to say, really. It depends on Congress, on how much pushback there is from Democrats and from advocacy groups. And of course, public opinion plays a role too.
And what about that election interference report? The charges might be gone, but the report's out there now. Do you think there will be, any lasting consequences?
I don't think it'll just disappear. Congress might launch investigations based on what's in the report. There could be renewed calls for stricter ethics rules for politicians. And, there's always public opinion, which can it can be pretty powerful.
It feels like we're at a crossroads.
In many ways, I think we are. The choices we make now, the decisions that are made, they're going to shape the future of the country. So,
okay, let's say I'm a regular person just trying to keep up with all this. What should I be paying attention to specifically?
That's a great question. Okay, first, definitely keep an eye on those California lawsuits. See which ones, make it to the Supreme Court, watch the arguments, the rulings. Those decisions could set some really important precedents.
So it's not just about California then?
Nope. This could have implications for federalism, states' rights, even the power of the president.
And the SNAP benefit cuts.
Yeah, pay attention to those budget debates. See what compromises are proposed, if any. And watch how different groups are reacting. This is a perfect example of how policy, directly affects people's lives.
It's easy to forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
That politics isn't just some abstract game.
Yeah. And don't forget about that election interference report. Even though the charges are gone, the report's it's still out there. Watch for any fallout from that. Hearings in Congress, maybe new laws, or even just more awareness of the issue.
So much to keep track of.
It is.
Guess we got to stay informed, stay engaged.
Absolutely. The political landscape is always changing, but that's what we're here for, to help you make sense of it all and to understand what it all really means.
We've only just scratched the surface today. But we'll be back for part 3. To wrap up our look at these 3 stories, it's almost like we're seeing 3 different Americas all at once.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You've got California, and they're really pushing for their vision, progressive values, protecting their people. Then there's this whole push for SNAP cuts, which is, it's a very different approach, more about fiscal responsibility, maybe even changing how the safety net works. And then, yeah, that election interference thing, it raises all these questions about democracy itself.
It's a lot. And it feels kind of, I don't know, unsettling. Like, where are we headed?
Yeah, I get that. These are big issues for sure. And the stakes are, well, they're high. But I think it's important to remember something. America has, well, it's always been a place with a lot of different opinions, different perspectives, disagreement and debate. I mean, they're part of our DNA.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's through those disagreements that we find a way forward.
So maybe this isn't like the end of America or something. Maybe it's just America figuring things out.
Right. Figuring out its identity, its values, what it wants to be in the future. And that takes all of us participating. We can't just, sit back and watch. We got to be part of the conversation. Challenge our own beliefs. Listen to people who see things differently.
It's like democracy is an action, not just a thing.
Exactly. We got to work at it. We got to keep building it. And in the end, I really believe that's how we shape the future. By being engaged, by having these tough conversations, even when it's messy.
That's a pretty hopeful way to look at it.
I try to be optimistic.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. If you want to learn more about these stories and a whole lot more, actually, head over to Videntis.com. And until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious.